Hello everyone and welcome back to one more video where we will be solving the nesting question of Codility lesson number 7. So in brief, we are given a string of parentheses and our function should return 1 if the string is properly nested, meaning all the opened parentheses were properly closed, and otherwise the function returns 0 in the opposite case. This question is very similar to the brackets exercise of lesson number 7 that we have already solved in a previous video. So you might want to check that one also. However, I believe that the brackets exercise is slightly harder than the one we are trying to solve here, because in that case you have different types of characters, while in this example we only have parentheses. So one type of characters to deal with. In my opinion, it would be better to solve this lesson first before going and checking the brackets example, although on the Codility website they were put in different order. Back to our problem, we are going to define a variable p that we would increment and decrement by 1 when we see an opening or a closing parentheses. So for example, here p will be equal to 1 at first, then we increment it by 1 because this is also an opening character. So we have p equal to 2, then 3. Then when we reach a closing parenthesis, we are going to decrement 3 by 1. So now we have 2. Then an opening character, we have 3, back to 2, back to 1, and at the end we have 0. So since we got p equal to 0 at the end of the string, this means that we have had as many opening characters as closing characters. And this way we can consider our string as properly nested, in which case our function should return 1. Now there is a trick here in our solution. What if you have the closing characters came before the opening characters and they are of the same number? So in this case you would still have p equal to 0 for a non-properly nested string. So this is what we are going to deal with next. Let's take this particular example where p will be equal to 1, then 2, then decremented 1, then 0, because we also decrementing, we have a closing character and one more closing character, and p is something negative, so we have -1 here. And the fact that we have a negative p, it means that at some point we have had closing characters in excess of the opening characters, just in the middle of the string, which makes it a non-properly nested string. And in this case, we can break out of our loop and just return 0 immediately. Another particular example where we should also return 0 is this one, where we have p equal to 1, then 2, then we decrement, we have a closing character, so we are back to 1, 2, 1, and at the end we have p equal to 2. The fact that p is positive, we should return 0. It means that the number of opening and closing parentheses is not equal, and in this case our string cannot be properly nested. This means that the second condition we are going to look for while we are reading the string characters concerns the value of p at the end of the string. Anything different than 0 and we return 0 because the string is not properly nested. Now let's see how to write this in C++ and in Python. So this is our solution in C++. This is the solution function. It takes a string as one parameter. Then we are declaring our integer counter p, which is equal to 0 at first. Then for an index I going from 0 to the size of the string, because we have to loop over all the characters at first. If si is an opening character, then I'm going to increment p by 1. Else if si is a closing character, closing parentheses, I'm going to decrement p by 1. And this here is kind of tricky. We have to check for every character if p is negative. And if it's the case, we have to return 0. If we don't put this one, it's something that we have already mentioned in this video. If we don't check for a p negative in the middle of the string, we might end up with a p equal to 0 at the end, meaning a balanced number of an opening and closing characters, but not necessarily a properly nested string. So the placement of this condition here is very crucial. It should be inside of the for loop. Then if we have reached the end of the string and we didn't run into this condition, so we haven't ended our loop yet, we have to check if p at the end of the string is different than 0. Anything that is different than 0, and we should return 0 also because the string is not properly closed, not properly nested. Otherwise, if all these conditions fail, then we have to return 1 because in this case our string is properly nested. In Python, the solution is similar to C++ and the algorithm that we have described. We have a solution function taking one list of characters or a string of characters. A variable p is equal to 0 at first. Then we have for I an index in the range of 0 up to the length of s, which is a list in our case here. So if si is an opening parenthesis, we are incrementing the counter p by 1. Else, if si is a closing parenthesis, we are decrementing p by 1. And we are checking within the for loop if p is negative. At any moment where p is negative, we return 0, because this means that at some point within the list of characters, we have an imbalance between the opened and the closed parentheses. Then after the for loop, when we have reached the end of our string, we are going to check if p is different than 0, in which case we are going to return 0. It means that we have a different number of opening and closing characters, and our string cannot be properly nested. Anything else, and we return 1, because we consider our string to be properly nested. And this is it for this exercise. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for staying that long, and happy coding.